My name is Ren Montgomery, and I am 28 years old. In just a few hours, I would be attending a gala where my father, a man who had erased me from his life, would be the guest of honor. He would stand on a stage and speak about legacy, about family, and about the impeccable standards of the Montgomery name. He would have no idea that the daughter he disowned was living in apartment 3B of the very building he was celebrating. He would have no idea that the snobbish, silver-haired tenants who complained about the new, lower class of people in the building were complaining about me. And he certainly had no idea that I was about to become his boss. This is the story of how I lost a family and found my worth in the last place they would have ever thought to look. It all started on a Tuesday, a day that would forever be stained with the cloying scent of overpriced perfume and the bitter taste of betrayal. My father summoned me to the family study, a room that had always felt more like a corporate boardroom than a place of comfort. The air was thick with the smell of old leather and his disappointment. "Ren," he began, not bothering to look up from the stock market ticker on his computer screen. "We're having dinner with the Hamiltons on Friday. Be ready at 7, wear the blue dress." I knew what this was. This wasn't a casual dinner. The Hamiltons owned a construction empire that my father had been trying to merge with for years. And they had a son, Julian, a man with a weak handshake and eyes that roamed freely. "What's the occasion?" I asked, my voice betraying a tremor I despised. "It's a merger," he said, finally turning to face me. His eyes were cold, calculating. "Julian Hamilton has agreed to the match. The contracts are being drawn up. This will solidify our family's future for generations." The words hit me like a physical blow. A match. A merger. Not a proposal, not a relationship, but a transaction. I was a commodity. "I'm not marrying Julian," I said, the words quiet but firm. "I barely know him, and what I do know, I don't like." My father stood up, his towering frame casting a long shadow over me. "This isn't about what you like, Ren. This is about your duty. Your brother, Liam, expands the business. You secure it. That is your role." "My role?" I felt a surge of heat crawl up my neck. "My role is to be sold off to the highest bidder? What about my life? My plans for my career in architecture?" He laughed, a short, sharp, dismissive sound. "Your little hobby? That's what your allowance is for. This is reality. You will be at that dinner, and you will be a charming, agreeable fiancé. Or you will find that the reality of living without the Montgomery name is far harsher than you can imagine." "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise," he said, turning back to his screen. "You are a Montgomery. You will do as you are told, or you will be nothing." I left his study with my heart pounding a frantic, desperate rhythm against my ribs. I was nothing to him but a chess piece, and he had just moved me into checkmate, but I refused to be captured. That night, I made a choice, and that choice cost me everything, or so I thought. If this is a story you think you might understand, if you have ever felt like you had to fight to be seen by your own family, hit that like button. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from. I want to know I am not alone in this, and don't forget to subscribe, because the story of what happened next is something you won't want to miss. To understand the chill in that study, you have to understand the climate I grew up in. The Montgomery household was not a home, it was a hierarchy, and I was born at the bottom of it. My brother, Liam, was the heir. He was 2 years older, and from the moment he was born, he was bathed in the golden light of my father's approval. His first word was car, and by 16, he had a brand new sports car my father bought him for learning the value of a good machine. My first word was draw, and my father told me it was a messy habit that I should do in my room out of sight. Liam's report cards, filled with respectable but unremarkable grades, were framed and hung in the study. He was praised for his people skills, which mostly involved being charming at my father's dinner parties. My straight-A reports were met with a cursory nod and a, "Well, of course. You don't have the social obligations your brother does. You have more time for books." Every achievement of mine was minimized, every interest dismissed as a triviality. When I won my first art competition in middle school for a detailed architectural sketch of our city's oldest bridge, my father glanced at the blue ribbon and said, "That's nice. Now, go help your mother set the table." Liam, on the other hand, once proposed a ridiculous idea for a gourmet dog food delivery service. My father invested $50,000 in it without blinking. It failed within 6 months, a fact that was quietly swept under the rug. Liam was praised for his entrepreneurial spirit. The message was clear, sent in 1,000 subtle and not-so-subtle ways every single day. Liam was an investment, I was an expense, he was the future of the company. I was a future bride to be bartered for its benefit. My mother was not cruel, not in the way my father was. She was simply a product of her environment, a woman who had married into wealth and power and had learned that the path of least resistance was the only one that led to peace. She floated through our lives like a ghost in couture, her main role to smooth over my father's rough edges and ensure the family presented a united, perfect front to the outside world. "Just be agreeable, Ren," she would whisper to me when I tried to argue a point with my father. "It's easier for everyone. Easier for her, easier for my father, easier for Liam, but for me, it was a slow, suffocating poison." There was only one person who saw me, my grandmother, Eleanor Montgomery, my father's mother. She was the matriarch of the family, but she was nothing like her son. She was made of steel and starlight, a woman who had built her own small fortune before she had ever married into the Montgomery wealth. She lived in a beautiful old house filled with books and art, and it was my sanctuary. While my father saw my drawings as a mess, Grandma Eleanor saw them as a gift. She would sit with me for hours, looking at my sketches of buildings and bridges. "You have a builder's eye, Ren," she told me once, her sharp, intelligent eyes scanning a drawing I had made of a fantastical skyscraper. "You see the bones of things, most people only see the skin." She was the one who bought me my first professional drafting set, smuggling it into the house like contraband. My father had wanted me to take etiquette and ballroom dancing. Grandma Eleanor signed me up for a summer course in architectural history. "Your father sees the world in terms of assets and liabilities," she told me, her voice low and conspiratorial as we sat in her sun-drenched garden. "It's a very limited view, don't ever let him convince you that's all there is." She knew what he was. She knew the pressure he was putting on me. She could not stop him, not directly, but she could arm me. One afternoon when I was 17, she called me to her study. It was a warm, inviting space, the polar opposite of my father's cold command center. She handed me a slim, leather-bound folder. "This is for you," she said. "It's a savings bond and a small portfolio of stocks. I opened it the day you were born. It's not a fortune, not by your father's standards. But it is yours. No one else knows about it. Not your father, not your mother. It's your cornerstone." I looked at her, confused. "Cornerstone?" She smiled, a rare, brilliant thing. "There is a saying, my dear. The stone that is ignored by the builder often becomes the cornerstone of a new and better building. He may ignore you, Ren, but you have a foundation of your own. When the time comes, you will know what to do with it." I didn't fully understand then, but I clutched that folder to my chest, a secret shield against the indifference of my own home. My grandmother saw me. She believed in me. It was a single flickering candle in a vast, echoing darkness, but it was enough to show me a path. That foundation was what allowed me to survive the neglect. While Liam was being handed everything, I was learning how to earn it. I got a part-time job at a coffee shop in high school, telling my parents it was for a school credit program. I saved every penny. I studied relentlessly, not just for the grades, but for the scholarships I knew I would need if I ever wanted to go to a good architecture school without my father's approval. The neglect forced me to become resilient. The favoritism made Liam complacent. I learned to budget, to work, to strive. He learned to expect, to accept, to coast. My father thought he was shaping a perfect son and a compliant daughter. He had no idea he was forging a weapon in the fires of his own disregard. He was making me strong enough to one day defy him. He was teaching me how to survive without him, and I was a very good student. The night of the ultimatum, the night he threatened to cast me out, was the culmination of it all. It was the moment the years of quiet slights and loud dismissals finally coalesced into one unbearable point of pressure. I fled his study and went to my room, my mind reeling. The walls, painted a soft, inoffensive beige my mother had chosen, felt like they were closing in on me. I sank onto my bed, the silk comforter feeling alien and cold. For a moment, I just let the despair wash over me, the sheer, crushing injustice of it. He would ruin my life for a business deal. He would marry me off to a man I detested, a man whose clammy touch made my skin crawl, and he would call it my duty. All my work, all my dreams of designing buildings that would shape the city's skyline, all of it was meant to be swept away for the sake of a signature on a contract. A sob escaped my lips, raw and painful. It was followed by another, and another, until I was choking on them. The tears were not just for the arranged marriage. They were for the little girl who won a ribbon and was told to set the table. They were for the teenager whose passion was called a hobby. They were for the woman who stood in front of her father and was seen not as a daughter but as an asset. My mother drifted into the room a few minutes later, her face a mask of practiced calm. "Ren, darling," she said softly, "your father is just tense. This deal is very important." "He's selling me," I said, my voice thick with tears. "He is selling his daughter." "Don't be so dramatic," she sighed, perching on the edge of my bed but not touching me. "It's a very advantageous match. The Hamiltons are a good family. You'll have a beautiful home. You'll have everything you could ever want." "I want a life," I shot back, my grief turning to white-hot anger. "I want a career. I want to choose who I marry. I want a father who sees me as a person." "Ren, you have to be practical," she said, her voice taking on a pleading tone. "This is how our world works. It's for the family. It's for Liam. It's for our future." "It's always for Liam," I said, the words dripping with years of accumulated bitterness. "When is it ever for me? Have you ever, once, stood up to him for me?" She flinched as if I had slapped her. Her face hardened. "Your father provides for this family. He gives us this life. You have a duty to him, to us, to not be so selfish." Selfish. The word was a slap in the face. I, who had asked for so little, who had worked for everything I had, was selfish. And Liam, who had burned through hundreds of thousands of dollars on failed ventures, was the dutiful son. The conversation was hopeless. She was a willing participant in her own gilded cage, and she expected me to meekly step into mine. The breakdown was over, the last tear had been shed. In its place, something cold and hard began to form in my chest. Resolve. I stood up and went to my closet. I pulled out a simple duffel bag, the one I used for weekend trips. I started packing. Not the designer dresses my father had bought me, but the jeans and sweaters I had purchased with my own money. My drafting tools, my textbooks, my laptop. "What are you doing?" my mother asked, her voice laced with alarm. "I'm refusing the merger," I said, my voice eerily calm. "I am not going to that dinner. I am not marrying Julian Hamilton." "Ren, don't be a fool," she hissed. "He will cut you off. You'll have nothing." "I will have myself," I replied, zipping the bag closed. "And that's more than I have in this house." I walked out of my room and down the grand sweeping staircase. My father was waiting at the bottom, his arms crossed over his chest. He had heard. "If you walk out that door," he said, his voice low and dangerous, "you are no longer a Montgomery. You will not get another dollar from me. Your car, your accounts, your credit cards, will be frozen by morning. You will be on your own." I met his gaze without flinching. "I've been on my own for years," I said, "I just didn't realize it." I walked past him, out the massive oak doors, and into the cool night air. I didn't look back. I got into the 10-year-old sedan I had bought with my coffee shop savings. It was parked next to Liam's gleaming new convertible. The contrast was a perfect metaphor for our lives. I sat there for a long moment, the engine off, the silence of the car, a stark contrast to the storm in my soul. I had done it. I had actually done it. The fear was a cold, coiling serpent in my stomach, but beneath it was a flicker of something else. Freedom. I pulled out my phone and called the only number I knew I could. My grandmother answered on the second ring. "He did it, didn't he?" she said, her voice sad but not surprised. "He did," I whispered. "I'm out, Grandma, I left. I have nothing." "Oh, my dear girl," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "You have your cornerstone. Remember what I told you? A builder needs a foundation. Now you go and build your house. Build it with stronger foundations than the one you just left." Her words were the final piece of steel I needed to fortify my resolve. My father thought he had left me with nothing, but he was wrong. My grandmother had given me a foundation. And my own struggle had given me the tools. I started the car and pulled out of the long, winding driveway of the Montgomery estate for the last time. I had a plan. It was crazy, it was audacious, and it was terrifying. I would disappear. I would become someone else. I would use the small nest egg from my grandmother to survive while I finished my certification and started my career. And I would do it right under my father's nose. There was a portfolio of buildings that Montgomery Properties owned. Most were high-end, luxury towers. But there were a few older ones my father had acquired in larger deals and mostly forgotten about. They were less prestigious, more affordable. I knew them because I had studied the company's assets as part of my own architectural education. One of them was the Alistair, a handsome, pre-war building with good bones but faded glory. It was respectable but not so upscale that the tenants would be in my father's social circle. It was the perfect place to hide in plain sight. The next day, I liquidated the stocks my grandmother had given me. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough. Enough for a deposit and a few months' rent if I was careful. I created a new identity. I couldn't use Montgomery, obviously. I chose Winters. It felt appropriate, a reflection of the cold new season of my life. And Ren became Ren. Simple, nondescript. Ren Winters, a freelance graphic designer, a plausible cover for my drafting work with no family and a quiet life. Finding the apartment was the easy part. A unit, 3B, was available at the Alistair. It was small, one bedroom with a galley kitchen and a view of a brick wall. The paint was peeling in one corner, and the radiator hissed like a cornered snake. It was perfect. The hard part began the moment I closed the door behind me. The silence of the apartment was deafening. The weight of my decision settled on me. I had no job, no friends in the city I could confide in, and a dwindling bank account. For the first week, I lived on instant noodles and fear. To make ends meet, I took a job as a waitress at a diner a few blocks away. The irony was not lost on me. I, Ren Montgomery, who had been raised to host charity galas, was now clearing dirty plates and refilling coffee for tired truck drivers. My hands, which were supposed to be holding drafting pens, were raw from hot water and cleaning solution. My feet ached constantly. At night, I would come home to my small, cold apartment, my body exhausted but my mind racing. I would spread my textbooks and drafting paper across the small kitchen table and study for my architectural licensing exams. I worked on my portfolio, creating designs for buildings that existed only in my imagination. The diner paid the rent. The drawings kept my soul alive. It was a grueling existence. I was more tired and more alone than I had ever been in my life. Some nights the loneliness was a physical ache, a hollow space in my chest that seemed to echo the emptiness of my apartment. I would scroll through social media and see pictures of my old life, of friends at parties I should have been at, of my family looking perfect and happy. And then there was Liam. His Instagram was a showcase of the life I had left behind. A weekend trip to Aspen on a private jet, a new watch that cost more than my entire year's rent. A celebratory dinner for his latest startup, InnovateX, which was, of course, funded by our father. One afternoon, I was walking home from my shift at the diner, my uniform smelling of grease and stale coffee, when a sleek black car pulled up beside me. The window rolled down, and there was Liam, looking impeccable in a tailored suit. "Ren, is that you?" he asked, his brow furrowed in a mixture of pity and disbelief. I just nodded, my cheeks burning with humiliation. "What are you doing dressed like that?" he asked. "I heard you left, but this?" He gestured vaguely at my stained apron. "It's called working, Liam," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "You should try it sometime." He winced. He pulled out his wallet and took out a thick fold of cash. "Here," he said, trying to press it into my hand. "Get yourself a decent meal. Dad's being ridiculous. He'll come around." I pushed his hand away. "I don't want his money, and I don't want yours." "Don't be proud, Ren," he said, his voice softening. "You don't have to live like this." "Yes," I said, looking him straight in the eye. "I do. This is my choice." I turned and walked away, leaving him sitting in his expensive car on the side of the road. I didn't want his pity. I didn't want his handout. His money was a link in the chain I had just broken, and I would rather starve than reforge it. But that night, sitting at my kitchen table, the loneliness felt more acute than ever. My struggle was invisible. My principles felt hollow. The contrast between my life and his was a chasm I feared I would never be able to cross. It was in that crucible of hardship, however, that the first cracks in my isolation began to appear. I wasn't just building a new life, I was, without realizing it, forging a new family. The first member was Mr. Henderson, the building superintendent. He was a gruff, elderly man with hands as gnarled as old tree roots and a perpetually grumpy expression. He saw me studying my architectural textbooks in the lobby one evening while waiting for my laundry. "What's all that?" he grumbled, gesturing with his wrench. "Just studying," I said. "Architecture." He grunted. "Lot of good that'll do you. This building's got more problems than a math book." He pointed to a water stain on the ceiling. "Plumbing's a mess. Landlord's too cheap to fix it proper, just patches it up. The main stack is probably corroded," I said, looking at the stain. "Given the age of the building, they should have replaced it years ago. A patch is just a temporary fix. It'll burst eventually, probably in the winter." Mr. Henderson stopped and stared at me, his bushy eyebrows raised in surprise. "How'd you know that?" "I've been looking at the original blueprints," I confessed. "I found them online in the city archive. The design is beautiful, but they used galvanized steel for the plumbing. It has a lifespan of about 40 to 50 years. This building is 50. A slow smile spread across his face. "Well, I'll be an egghead who knows something useful." From that day on, our relationship changed. He would stop by my apartment with a leaky faucet that was just an excuse to look at my drawings. He would tell me stories about the building, about the families who had lived and died within its walls. He respected my knowledge, something I had never gotten from my own father. He became my first unlikely ally. My second was Maya. She lived in the apartment next to mine, 3A. She was a painter, a whirlwind of chaotic energy, bright scarves, and the perpetual smell of turpentine. Her apartment was a disaster of canvases, paint tubes, and empty coffee cups. "I can't get the light right," she complained to me one day in the hallway. "This place is a cave. How am I supposed to paint?" I peeked inside. "Your layout is all wrong," I told her. "If you move your easel over here, by the window, and put a large mirror on that opposite wall, you'll double your natural light." She looked skeptical but desperate enough to try. The next day she knocked on my door, her eyes wide with excitement. "You're a genius, a magician, it's like a whole new room." We became fast friends after that. We were two struggling artists, surviving on cheap wine and shared dreams. She would bring me her latest painting to critique, and I would show her my latest design. We were each other's cheerleaders, a two-person support system against a world that didn't seem to value what we did. Then there was Professor Albright, my instructor for one of my online licensing courses. He was a legendary figure in the city's architecture scene, known for his brutal critiques and his uncompromising standards. I submitted my final project, a complete redesign of a dilapidated public space, with a trembling hand. He scheduled a video call with me. I expected him to tear it apart. Instead, he was quiet for a long moment, looking at my renderings on his screen. "Miss Winters," he said finally, his voice thoughtful. "This is not the work of a student, this is the work of an architect. Your use of sustainable materials, your understanding of traffic flow, your respect for the community's history, it's exceptional." I was speechless. "Who did you study under?" he asked. "No one," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm self-taught, mostly." He looked at me, really looked at me, through the screen. "Well," he said, "keep going. You have a rare talent. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." His validation was like water in a desert. Mr. Henderson, Maya, Professor Albright, they were not my family by blood, but they were becoming my family by choice. They saw me, Ren Winters, the waitress, the quiet tenant, the anonymous student, and they saw my value. They didn't care about my last name or my bank account. They cared about my work, my mind, my spirit. Slowly, painstakingly, my hard work began to bear fruit. I passed my licensing exams, one by one. I was now a certified architect. I started a small freelance business from my kitchen table, Winters Design Studio. My first real client was Maya's friend, who needed his small bakery redesigned. I did it for a fraction of what a big firm would charge. I opened up the space, designed custom shelving that was both beautiful and functional, and created a flow that made the tiny shop feel welcoming and spacious. He was so thrilled he told 2 other small business owners. Soon, I had a steady stream of small projects. redesigning a yoga studio, drafting plans for a home addition, consulting on a cafe layout. It wasn't glamorous. I was still working out of my tiny apartment, but I was paying my rent with money I earned as an architect. I quit my job at the diner. Every completed project was a brick in the foundation of my new life. Every satisfied client was a testament to my skill. My designs had a unique quality that bigger firms often missed. Because I had struggled, because I knew what it was like to live in a small, poorly designed space, I had a practical empathy. I knew how to maximize light and space on a tight budget. I knew how to make things functional as well as beautiful. My hardship had become my professional advantage. I was not just surviving anymore. I was beginning to build. Grandma Eleanor's words echoed in my mind. The stone, the builder refused. I was finally finding my place. Not as a forgotten piece of a grand estate, but as the cornerstone of my own small but sturdy creation. The turning point, the moment my small private success broke through into the public sphere, came from a place I least expected it. The City Architectural Board announced its annual design competition. This year's project was a big one, a new public library for the city's most underserved neighborhood. It was a massive undertaking, the kind of project that launched careers. Big, established firms would be competing for it. The idea of me, Ren Montgomery, I would have to use my real name for a professional bid like this competing against them was laughable. Ren Winters, working from her kitchen table, had no chance. But the project spoke to me, a library. A place of knowledge, of sanctuary, of self-improvement. A place where anyone, regardless of their background, could have access to the tools to build a better life. It was the story of my own recent past, rendered in brick and mortar. Maya and Mr. Henderson pushed me to do it. You have to, Maya insisted. Your ideas are better than any of those corporate stiffs. That neighborhood deserves a good building, Mr. Henderson added gruffly. Not some glass box that'll leak in 5 years. They need something with heart. You got heart. So, I did it. For 2 months, I poured every spare moment, every ounce of my energy and creativity into that proposal. I barely slept. I lived on coffee and passion. I designed a building that was innovative and sustainable, but also deeply connected to the community it was meant to serve. It had soaring spaces for quiet reading and cozy nooks for children's story time. It used reclaimed local materials. It was filled with light. I submitted the proposal under my real name, Ren Montgomery, and sent it off with a prayer. I expected nothing. A month later, I got a call from the city. I had made the shortlist. I was one of 3 finalists. I was stunned. The final stage was a public presentation in front of the board, which included none other than my old mentor, Professor Albright. I stood before them, a nervous wreck in my one good suit, and I presented my design. I didn't talk about complex architectural theories. I talked about hope. I talked about community. I talked about what a building could mean to the people inside it. When I finished, the room was silent. Then Professor Albright smiled. 2 days later, the news broke. My design had won. Ren Montgomery, an unknown independent architect, had beaten out 2 of the city's largest firms to win the contract for the new community library. It came with a substantial commission and the lead role in overseeing the construction. My name was in the paper. My picture was on the local news. It was a major, objective, undeniable success. It was this public victory that brought my brother, Liam, back into my life. Not with pity this time, but with desperation. He showed up at my apartment door one evening, looking haggard. His suit was wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. I saw the news, he said, his voice flat. Congratulations, it's amazing, Ren. Thank you, I said, stepping aside to let him in. He looked around my small, cluttered apartment at the drafting table covered in blueprints for the library. He didn't look down on it this time. He looked impressed. InnovateX failed, he said bluntly, sinking onto my lumpy sofa. It failed spectacularly. I'm in debt. Dad is furious. I'm sorry to hear that, Liam, I said, and I meant it. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a humility I had never seen in him before. It was a stupid idea, all flash, no substance. Dad just threw money at it. He never asked the hard questions. He never made me prove it would work. He ran a hand through his hair. I saw your library design online. The details, the planning, it's brilliant. You actually know how to build something real. Something that lasts. He paused and then he said the words I had waited my whole life to hear from him. I was wrong, Ren. We were wrong. About everything. He explained that he had one last chance. A small, viable idea for a community-focused tech incubator. But he needed a solid business plan, a physical space designed for collaboration. He didn't need money. He needed my help. He needed my brain. Would you look at my plans? He asked, his voice small. The architectural part, the layout, I don't know what I'm doing. This was the moment of role reversal. The golden child, stripped of his privilege, coming to the forgotten daughter for help. It would have been so easy to be smug, to turn him away. But looking at his face, I saw not the arrogant brother I had grown up with, but a man who was lost and, for the first time, willing to admit it. Okay, Liam, I said. Let's take a look. We sat at my kitchen table for hours, me with my red pen, marking up his plans, asking the hard questions my father never had. It was the first real conversation we had ever had as equals. He listened. He respected my expertise, he saw my value. By the end of the night, a bridge had been built between our two worlds. He was no longer just my brother, he was becoming my ally. My parents, however, remained willfully blind. After the news of the library broke, my mother called. Ren, darling, we saw you in the paper, she said, her voice bright and breezy. A library, how lovely. A nice little art project for you. A little art project, the biggest public commission in the city that year. I felt a familiar wave of frustration wash over me. It's a bit more than that, Mom, I said tiredly. Well, it's wonderful that you have a hobby to keep you busy, she continued, completely missing the point. But listen, the real reason I'm calling is that it has been almost a year. Don't you think it's time to put this foolishness behind you? Your father is willing to be the bigger person. If you come home and apologize, we can put all this unpleasantness behind us. Apologize. I was supposed to apologize for succeeding on my own terms. I was supposed to crawl back and beg forgiveness for not allowing myself to be sold. I have nothing to apologize for, I said, my voice cold. I've built a life for myself, a career. I'm happy. Don't be silly, Ren. She scoffed. Living in that dreary apartment, working on your little projects. You can't possibly be happy. Come home. It's where you belong. I ended the call, my hands shaking. They still didn't get it, they couldn't. My success was incomprehensible to them because it wasn't measured in Montgomery money or social connections. It was mine, and therefore, in their eyes, it was insignificant. Their continued obliviousness was the final wall between us, a wall I no longer had any desire to climb. A week later, a thick, cream-colored envelope arrived in the mail for Ren Winters. It was an invitation. Montgomery Properties was celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Alistair building with a black tie gala. All tenants were formally invited. The event was to be held in the building's main lobby. My father would be giving the keynote address. It was a celebration of his legacy, his success. I was about to throw it away when my phone rang. It was Liam. You got the invitation, right? He asked. Yes, I said. I'm not going. You have to go, Ren, he said, his voice urgent. You have to be there. Why? So I can stand in the back and watch Dad preen on stage? So my lovely neighbors can sneer at my dress? No, thank you. Because it's time, he said quietly. It's time they saw you. Not the idea of you they have in their heads, but the real you. The you that I'm finally getting to know. Please, Ren, let me be your ally for real this time. Trust me. I hesitated. The thought of facing them all, of being in that room, filled me with dread. But the plea in Liam's voice was genuine. For the first time, we were a team. Okay, I said, my heart pounding. I'll go. The night of the gala arrived, a swirl of cold autumn air and glittering city lights. I stood in front of the mirror in my small apartment, looking at my reflection. I wasn't wearing a designer gown. I was wearing a simple, elegant black dress I had bought with my first commission check. It was a warrior's armor, paid for by my own skill and sweat. The lobby of the Alistair had been transformed. Crystal glasses clinked, a string quartet played softly, and the city's elite mingled under the soft glow of the chandeliers. I recognized many of them from my father's parties. To them, I was invisible, just another face in the crowd. Mr. Henderson, looking uncomfortable in a borrowed suit, gave me a thumbs up from across the room. Maya, who had come as my +1, squeezed my hand. "You look amazing," she whispered, "like you own the place." If only you knew, I thought. The public slight, when it came, was both predictable and breathtaking in its casual cruelty. I was getting a glass of water when I saw my mother talking to a couple I recognized as my neighbors, the Harringtons. They were the most vocal complainers in the building, a wealthy, snobbish pair who embodied everything my father valued. As I walked past, I heard Mr. Harrington's booming voice. "Honestly, Clarice?" He was saying to my mother, "The quality of tenants in this building has gone downhill. Montgomery Properties needs to be more selective, that girl in 3B for instance." My mother, Clarice, looked uncomfortable but offered a weak, non-committal smile. She had no idea who they were talking about. "The artist, or whatever she is," Mrs. Harrington added, her nose wrinkled in distaste. "She just seems so common, not the sort of person one expects to rub shoulders with at the Alistair." I froze, my back to them. My own mother, listening to people insult her daughter, and nodding along so as not to cause a scene. The familiar ache of being invisible, of being lesser than, washed over me. Just then, the music softened, and my father strode to the podium at the front of the room. He looked powerful, confident, every inch the titan of industry. He began his speech, talking about the history of the building, about the Montgomery commitment to quality and excellence. He talked about legacy. "A legacy is not just built of brick and steel," he boomed, his voice echoing through the lobby. "It is built on family. It is about passing on our values, our drive to the next generation." My heart stopped. Was he going to mention me? "And I could not be prouder of my son, Liam," he continued, beaming as he gestured to my brother, who was standing near the stage. "He has faced challenges, yes, but with the guidance and support of his family, he is now launching a new, promising venture that will carry the Montgomery name into the future. A true chip off the old block." Nothing, not a word about me, not a mention of the daughter who had just won the city's most prestigious architectural award. He had not just erased me from his life, he had erased me from the public record. In his story, I did not exist. The applause was deafening. My mother looked at him with tears of pride in her eyes. The Harringtons were clapping enthusiastically. I felt a profound, chilling calm settle over me. The hurt was gone, replaced by a serene, diamond-hard certainty. This was it. My father finished his speech and introduced his son. "And now, to say a few words, my son, Liam Montgomery." Liam walked to the podium. He looked pale but determined. He adjusted the microphone and looked out at the crowd. He met my eyes for a brief second, a look of shared purpose passing between us. My calm, decisive action was to simply stand my ground, to trust him. This was his move to make. "Thank you, Dad," Liam began, his voice clear and steady. The crowd quieted, expecting more self-congratulatory platitudes. "I appreciate the kind words," Liam continued, "but I'm afraid you have the story a little wrong." A confused murmur rippled through the audience. My father, standing beside the stage, frowned. "My last venture didn't have challenges," Liam said, his voice gaining strength. "It was a complete and total failure. I lost everything." "And the guidance and support that you're talking about, Dad? It was a blank check with no oversight. That's not guidance, that's enablement." The room was utterly silent now. My father's face had gone from confusion to a deep, dangerous red. My mother looked horrified. "The person who is actually helping me rebuild," Liam went on, his voice ringing with conviction, "the person who has the real vision, the one with the talent and the grit and the integrity, is my sister." He turned and pointed directly at me, standing near the back of the room. "The brilliant architect who just won the city library contract. My sister, Ren Montgomery." A collective gasp went through the lobby. Heads swiveled to stare at me. I saw the Harringtons' jaws drop, their faces a comical mask of shock and horror. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. But Liam wasn't done. "And she's not just a brilliant architect," he said, his voice rising. "For the past year, she has also been living right here, in this building, in apartment 3B. She's been living here as Ren Winters because a year ago our father threw her out of his house. He disowned her. Why? Because she had the courage to refuse to be sold off in an arranged marriage designed to benefit his business." The gasps turned to shocked whispers. The scandal was rich, it was juicy, it was public. My father looked like he had been turned to stone. "So, while I was squandering his money," Liam said, his eyes now fixed on our father, "my sister was waiting tables to pay her rent. While I was attending parties, she was studying all night to get her architect's license. She built a career from nothing, with no help from anyone, especially not from you." He took a deep breath, preparing for the final, devastating blow. This was the part he had only told me about an hour before the gala, a secret he had uncovered in the family's legal files. "And while we're clearing things up," he said, his voice dropping to a dramatic hush, "I learned something interesting this week. Our grandmother, Eleanor Montgomery, a woman of true vision, structured her will in a very specific way. She didn't just leave us jewelry and memories. She left her original founding shares in Montgomery Properties, a controlling interest as it turns out." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. He looked directly at me again, a slow smile spreading across his face. "And she left them all to Ren." For a heartbeat, there was absolute silence. Then, a single person began to clap. It was Mr. Henderson, his face split in a wide, proud grin. Then, Maya started cheering. Then Professor Albright, who was standing with the city officials, began to applaud loudly. Within seconds, the entire room, save for a small, frozen circle around my parents, erupted in thunderous applause. My father stood, pale and trembling. My mother looked like she was going to faint. The Harringtons were desperately trying to become one with the wallpaper. With my head held high, I began to walk through the stunned crowd. The sea of people parted for me as I made my way to the stage. I didn't look at my father. I didn't look at my mother. I walked past them and stood next to my brother, my ally, my family. I looked out at the faces, the shocked, the curious, the admiring. I was no longer Ren Winters, the common tenant from 3B. I was Ren Montgomery, the architect, the owner. The woman who had been ignored, dismissed, and discarded. I was the cornerstone of a new and better building, and everyone, finally, could see it. The aftermath of the gala was swift and decisive. The world, it turned out, loves a story of vindication. My story was on every business blog and society page by morning. Ousted heiress takes control of real estate empire. I didn't fire my father. That would have been his move, a crude display of power. My move was more subtle, and far more effective. I took my rightful seat as the majority shareholder and chairperson of the board of Montgomery Properties. My father now had to report to me. The power dynamic had not just shifted, it had inverted. My first official act was to call a board meeting. I presented a new 5-year plan. It involved a massive capital investment into the company's older, more neglected properties, like the Alistair. I announced a new tenant policy, one that valued community and character alongside financial statements. I allocated funding for an apprenticeship program for young, underprivileged architecture students. I was transforming my father's company from a cold, profit-driven machine into something with a conscience, something with heart. I was rebuilding it from the foundations up, just as my grandmother had advised. My life changed overnight, but I didn't move out of apartment 3B right away. I stayed for a few more months, overseeing the initial renovations on the building myself, much to the confusion of the other tenants. Mr. Harrington tried to apologize to me in the elevator one day, stammering and sweating. I just gave him a cool, polite smile and said, "I trust your tenancy issues are being resolved, Mr. Harrington." He nearly jumped out of his skin. My new reality was a blend of the two worlds I had inhabited. I spent my days in boardrooms and on construction sites for the library, and my evenings having cheap pizza with Maya in her newly bright studio apartment, or talking shop with Liam over plans for his now thriving incubator. I had my chosen family around me, a network of support built on mutual respect and genuine affection. They had seen my worth when I was Ren Winters, and their friendship was the truest currency I owned. My parents were a different story. They were humbled, broken, and lost. The public humiliation had shattered the perfect facade they had spent their lives constructing. For the first time, they were forced to look at the wreckage of their own choices. At Liam's insistence, we started family therapy. The first few sessions were excruciating. My father sat in stony silence. My mother cried. But, slowly, painstakingly, the walls began to come down. My father, stripped of his absolute authority, was forced to listen. He heard in raw, painful detail how his dismissal had shaped my life, how his ambition had nearly cost him both his children. His apology came 6 months later. It was not in a therapy session but in my new office, the one that used to be his. He stood before my desk, looking old and tired. "I was wrong, Ren," he said, his voice thick with an emotion I couldn't identify. "It might have been remorse. I spent my whole life measuring value in dollars and stock points. I tried to measure you with that same broken ruler. I was wrong." It wasn't a perfect apology. It didn't erase years of hurt. But it was a start. It was a crack in the stone. I established new boundaries. Our relationship would be rebuilt, but on my terms. There were no more commands, only invitations. We had dinner once a month. It was awkward, but it was real. Forgiveness, I learned, is not a pardon. It is a long, slow process of rebuilding trust on new, more honest ground. The power was mine now, not to wield as a weapon, but to use as a shield to protect my own peace. I no longer needed his approval, and that freedom was the greatest success of all. Looking back, I realized the most valuable thing my father ever gave me was nothing. By cutting me off, he forced me to find my own resources. By underestimating me, he fueled my determination. By refusing to see my worth, he compelled me to build it for myself, brick by painful brick. The lesson in all of this is one that is carved into the very foundation of my new life. Your value is not a reflection in someone else's eyes, especially not in the eyes of those who refuse to see you. It is a fire you build within yourself. Sometimes, the family you are born into is just the starting point, the flawed blueprint from which you must design your own structure, your own home. And the family you choose, the one built on love and respect, is the one that will truly shelter you from the storm. Have you ever had to fight to prove your worth to someone who should have seen it all along? Have you ever had to build your own success from the ground up? I would love to read your story in the comments below. We are all architects of our own lives, and sharing our blueprints can help others build theirs. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to hit that like button if my story resonated with you, and please subscribe for more stories of triumph and transformation. And always remember, you hold the plans, you lay the foundation, you are the builder. Go and create something that will last.